Adjustment meeting. Welcome. Join me in the pledge to the flag. You moved the flags on us, didn't you? Did you do that, Sharon?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Okay, a few items to cover before we get started. Please sign in at the door if you have not already done so. You'll find a detailed handout of the step-by-step procedure we'll follow tonight if you wish to take one. Electronic devices should be on silent. And please note all testimony is being recorded for the record. Members of the Board of Adjustment are appointed by the County Board of Commissioners with one member from each of the 5 commissioner districts. Land Services staff is here to assist the Board of Adjustment with its duties. The task of the Board of Adjustment is to consider requests for variances, appeals from an order, requirement, or decision made by a county zoning official in accordance with state law and county ordinance. Each request is considered on its own merit. The burden of proving a practical difficulty rests with the applicant. If a variance is granted, it is granted to the land, not to the landowner. There is a protocol for how we will proceed. Each variance request on the agenda, we will hear a staff report, hear testimony from the applicants, then the board will discuss and gather more information as needed. Next, I will ask if there's anyone in the audience wishing to speak on the request. I will ask each party to come to the podium, state your names for the record, and give their testimony. Please be as factual as possible. After testimony is complete, I will close the public hearing portion of the process. Then the board will review, discuss the case in terms of finding of fact criteria as required by Minnesota statute and county ordinance. We will have a series of votes, discuss whether conditions be made, have a final motion to approve or deny the request based on those findings. After the final vote on your request, you may leave if you wish. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First item on the agenda is Bradley Haig. The applicant can come forward and sit at the front table. 7402 Mallard Drive, Randall. Application for a variance to construct a detached garage within the setback to the wetland, located in Enchanted Lakes, Birchwood North, Cushing Township. Applicant, please state your name for the record.
Lonnie Haig.
Thank you. Amy?
Yep. Mr. Chair, this is a variance request to construct a structure within setback to wetlands, and this is located in Section 18 of Cushing Township. The ordinance reference for this request is 1103, which are the wetland setbacks. And then here's a plat map of the township with the red dot with the location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant. And then a site drawing with the existing layout, with the new proposed garage layout, and then the wetland protection during construction. And here's an aerial photograph. It's 2 parcels outlined in yellow and blue. And then here's some imagery of the property. And then here's some photographs that were taken at the site viewing on the 15th. Again, the property is in Section 18 of Cushing Township within the Enchanted Lakes Birchwood North Addition. The property is zoned residential and is made up of 2 parcels, and together it is a conforming single lot. The property is 160 feet wide and 67,338 square feet. The property is on the corner of Mallard Drive and Buckthorn Pass, which are both private roads. And then here is just a zoomed out aerial showing the location of the property on the roads. The property is at least 50% wetland with little to no building envelope when setback to the wetland and setback from the property line is taken into account. And then here is the borders of the wetland outlined in red. According to the National Wetland Inventory, the open water wetland is a type 6, which requires a 25-foot setback. However, upon Soil and Water Conservation District field verification, it is a type 3, which requires a 50-foot setback. Also, a type 2 wetland was identified on the northern part of the property, and that was also outlined in the Soil and Water Conservation District report. And the existing 1,120 square foot dwelling and 12 by 20 garage were permitted in 1992. Both are within setback to the wetlands. The applicant is proposing to replace the existing 12 by 20 garage with a 30 by 30 garage. The location of the garage would shift slightly to square up with the house, and the additional square footage would be added to the north and east. And you can see that in the applicant's before and after sketches. The new garage would be 35 feet from the type 3 wetland, which is a 15-foot encroachment, and 11 feet from the type 2 wetland, which is a 14-foot encroachment. The Wetland Conservation Act prohibits building within, disturbing, and filling of most wetlands, but does not require setback from wetlands. The Morrison County Land Use Control Ordinance requires the setback from wetland to ensure no impact within the wetland during construction and ongoing maintenance and activity. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1. The water plan goals and objectives, surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 186 notices were sent and 1 comment was received prior to the hearing, and I will read that. And that is from Alan Ringwelski from the Soil and Water Conservation District. He was out on site. He said the wetland map states it is a type 2-6 wetland, but it's definitely type 3, which pushes the applicant back another 25 feet. Unfortunately, that almost places them into the road. The current garage is a tiny thing. I do not believe these are the original owners, so the situation was not their doing. So in my opinion, they are really stuck between the wetland and a hard place, which is the public road. And I seldom comment on variances, but do support this one. And those are criteria questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does the applicant have anything to add at this time?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you. So Alan's letter was in support of that. And I noticed also in the DRT meeting report that Shannon also stated as long as proper erosion controls are used, it should be okay. The wetland does give a hardship. So Soil and Water seems supportive. Who's, I know you have provided a sheet that says wetland protection, but that's pretty vague. Who's helping you with
That
plan?
would have been my contractor, Spencer Gruis, but he wasn't able to be here tonight. He was doing another job, unfortunately for me. And then my husband's out of town, so that leaves me here sitting in front of all of you. So I know you're asking about protecting the wetland, is that what you said?
Yes.
They're gonna use like a silt fence,
Yes.
to like protect from things getting in there. Also on, there was existing, I've made notes because I get all nervous. Existing like rock retaining walls that were put in by previous owners. So they're like at least a 5-foot drop down. So it's not like we're gonna take any trucks or anything and accidentally drive in the wetlands, because I mean, you would be probably about tipped over at that point. So let's see what else he's got. Gutters, I know that they're gonna install to avoid stormwater runoff and things like that. I wish one of them were here, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you. That's fine. The silt fence, I assume that's temporary during construction.
Yeah, just during construction.
But the
That's
permanent
correct.
stormwater plan, is that something that Land Services will help them develop? Is that something Soil and Water has volunteered to do? Or, I mean, we need a stormwater plan.
Mr. Chair, I think when we field check this one, we'll certainly have that discussion regarding how to avoid discharge to the wetland in the future. It's really going to come down to vegetation between the garage and the wetland and having enough vegetated distance between, and then the direction of the stormwater coming off of the garage and not routing that directly to those wetland areas. So really, that's what a stormwater plan would look like for this.
And you'll help them review that.
Yes, I mean, we certainly can, or you can require that they submit one at the time of permitting.
Sure.
Mr.
Okay,
Chair,
thank you. Go ahead, Clint.
I think just early on to kind of, so we don't beat this to death, I'll suggest 3 conditions.
Okay.
One would be that she already said they'll put up silt fence and that during construction. So that would be during construction to protect that wetland. That would be one condition. Another condition would be that the gutters are forcing the water away from the wetland. If it goes to the south or the east, whatever works. And the third condition would be reading through the DRT meeting and they're talking about the difference in the vegetation, and that's why the wetland changed. And they're talking about keeping the right plants in that buffer between their house and their garage and that wetland is what's essential. So I would make that a third condition that the right plants would be in there, and that could be off of a recommendation of what soil and water. So I would encourage you to work with soil and water on that part of it. So I think with them 3 conditions, I think that'll help us from beating this to death for a while.
Yep, and with land services reviewing also. Yep. Does that sound acceptable to you?
Yes,
Probably what you were planning anyway.
yes, as far as I know.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you. Go ahead,
I
Clint.
just had one question along with that, and I'm assuming, so I just want to make sure. So like you said, there's retaining walls and that's built up. We've seen all that dirt around there.
Yes.
So during construction, none of that's changing.
No, none of that is
The only
changing.
fill you'd have is if you need a little bit here and there
We
to
just
get
need
the
to bring
garage
that
level.
garage up a
Yep.
little bit, because right now it's at a slope,
Yep.
so it floods all the time.
Yep.
And the bottom's rotting out of our current
Yep.
garage.
Yep.
So they just need to build that up enough to, have
But
it at the right plane.
where the rocks are and the whole
No, we're
pad there,
not-
that's not
We're
changing.
not.
Okay,
No, that's a mess.
Okay.
No, we're not doing that.
I'm good then, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, Clint. Anybody else have anything to add? Questions for the applicant or staff?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Marv.
first question, why did you not want to attach this garage to a house?
I think just with the way our house is, our lot is so odd. I guess we never really thought about attaching it to the house. My husband just said he wanted like a 30 by 30, garage off, basically right where we are, but just, so it lines up with it. That, I guess that just wasn't a discussion, was attaching it to our house, because it's all of our, you have to go upstairs to get in the house anywhere you go. So I think that was probably part of it too. It'd just be kind of odd.
Okay, that makes sense, because when we were up there, we kind of observed that. And then with the water flow, in the way you can direct it, it's probably better off being absorbed on both sides rather than one, and
Okay.
able to control it that way. Next comment I wanted to make, really a nice job filling out your request.
Thank you.
Very detailed, and really nice to see that, because we don't always see that. So
Well, thank
nice,
you.
that. I think that is all I have at this moment.
Okay, thanks, Marv.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Clint.
just being Marv said that about the garage, after, I kind of wondered the same thing, but after we see this plan and how the wetland fits in, if they were to attach this to the house, that would actually encroach into the wetland a little bit more. If they set it back and get it hooked on. So that's just one observation, just at an angle of how we come in there and stuff. And I just kind of seen that and realized that now, so being he talked about attaching it, I just thought I'd comment on that.
Thanks, Clint. You're familiar with the fact that these are non-conforming structures. They don't meet setbacks.
I am aware of that, yes.
Yes. So any future additions you might do to anything there, of course, requires a trip to land services and.
Gosh, it's a
Yeah.
lot there, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you do have an interesting lot and situation there.
That's
And
what we'll
I
call
agree with Marv, you did a very good job of proving your practical difficulty in your application and answering all the questions.
Thank you.
So, we're ready for public input? Okay. Yep. Over to the podium on that side. I guess any microphone would work, but that's the designated one. State your name and address.
Paul Michael Ross. I'm from Enchanted Lakes, 27354 Honey Hill Road. First of all, does it affect the wetland credits? And second of all, the vegetation. How close is it to the road? The water runoff, where's it gonna go? Do you got a $600 variance on this too that you had to pay? Dimension of size, what is your actual size? It went so fast I couldn't catch it, I come in late. A Buckhorn Pass in which Partridge?
Excuse me, would you repeat that?
Buckhorn Pass was part of the layout, and which is the other road next to or whatever?
Mallard Drive.
No,
Mallard?
we'll answer
Oh,
these
I'm
questions
sorry.
after he's
Sorry,
done.
sorry.
Okay. I'm very familiar with Enchanted Lakes. I've been out there since 2003, 2004. Part of my questions I brought with is due to people who you gave permits to last year, whenever I've been here, 2020, on Timber Pass. Jarrett Kramer's one. And there's another one coming up with Don Strummer on Woodchuck for a variance. I'm willing to look at one or two properties, but I do not have the time to take care of everything out there.
Are you with the township or,
Nope,
okay, just a.
resident,
Okay, just a resident, okay.
correct,
Is that all of your questions?
yes.
Okay, we'll answer that after public input is complete.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other public input at this time? Any other public input? One more time, any other public input? If not, the meeting is closed to public input. Did you
can
get all
answer.
those questions?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chair. So the location of this one is on the corner of Buckhorn Pass and Mallard Drive. So that's the location of this particular property. The setback, since it's a private road, the setback that these structures need to meet is 10 feet from the traveled road surface. However, the property line is farther back from that, so these structures will be probably about 30 feet from the traveled edge of the road. The wetland credits, so since no wetland is being filled for this project, there will be no need for purchase of wetland credits because this is a variance to encroach on the setback from the wetland, but it is not a request to build in the wetland. So no wetland will be filled or reduced with this request. As far as other requests, I'm not aware of any other variance requests that are coming up in the Enchanted Lakes area. We do notice everyone within a half-mile radius when someone's asking for a variance. So if you fall in within a half-mile radius of a particular property, you will get that notice, and that's your opportunity to call us and ask detailed questions if you're interested or want to know, or come to the meeting and provide comment. And then, yes, the charge for a variance, the fee that someone needs to pay when they're asking for a variance is $600. And I think that was everything I had written down for questions. Did I answer everything? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yeah. 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 Oh, I'm sorry, the garage size, 30 by 30 is what. Mr. Chair, would defer to the applicant as far as how much fill are you planning to bring in to build up this garage? Or what would the elevation change be between the garage you have now and how this one's gonna sit?
I would have to text my contractor on that, I'm so sorry. I know that's not an appropriate answer. I didn't ask him that, I'm sorry.
Okay, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I would
thank
imagine
you.
it's gonna be whatever's reasonable, but it's not going to be 5-6 feet.
No.
Higher,
Just
correct?
enough to bring it up level with the
So-
house so it doesn't get flooded all the time.
So
by
I'm
rain.
just gonna show a site photo that might be helpful. So here is, sir, if you see this photo, this is what's happening on site now. It'll just be raised so it's even. See the block at the bottom of that house where the siding starts? My understanding is that it'll be filled to be elevated to about there. So probably about a foot maybe higher than what it is now. Yep, and then you are planning to gutter
Yes.
the garage?
Yes,
So the garage will be guttered and then that'll be directed, that water will be directed away from that wetland complex. Okay,
All right, thank you. Questions answered. Yep, thanks for commenting tonight. Are we ready for the questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead, Brad.
I don't know if we covered it or not, but just, we were all out there on Friday.
Yep. Good point. All 5 of us viewed along with Amy on Friday. So Friday the 15th. Nobody was home at the time, but you were aware that we were going to be there.
yes, I was.
Okay, thanks for reminding me of that. Okay, anything else before we go to the questions? Okay, let's go to the questions. Is the request in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Would you start us out, Clint?
Sure. I would say yes. We look through, they're asking for relief from the wetland, from the setback of the wetland. If we look, that's kind of county ordinance. If we look at the Wetland Act, they kind of pretty close meet that. But we have concerns, and the reason we have the setbacks is to protect the wetland. And I think with the conditions that we recommended and doing them things, I think it kind of mitigates some of that. So they're coming here with the variance process, going through this way with the support of Soil and Water, with kind of the conditions that I mentioned earlier. I think it helps me answer this in yes.
Thank you, Clint. Anything to add to that, anybody? Okay, we'll go on to question number 2. Is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? John?
I think Clint covered a good chunk of that in his answer to number 1, but the applicant also addresses it very well in the answer provided. But the fact that you have 2 people from Soil and Water supporting this in addition to all of the other information we've received, this is more than reasonable.
Okay, thank you, John. Anybody else have anything to add to that? No, public input is finished. It's just our time to review these questions. Okay, so on to question number 3. Will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Marvin?
Yes, and, well, majority of that is, their property, 50% is wetland. A good share of Enchanted Acres is also wetland. And I'm going to read off what she wrote because I thought she did such a good job with filling this out. The request variance will maintain the character of the neighborhood as well as keeping the wildlife and wetlands undisturbed. We are placing a solid structure that will bring up the value of our property as well as protect our vehicles and belongings. We plan on using silt fence to protect the wetlands and properly reseeding upon completing. I don't need to put anything more to it, but yeah, it fits in very well in what they're trying to do.
Okay, thank you, Marv. Anybody else on question number 3? Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Brent?
I think this is a unique lot. It is a conforming lot. However, it's 50% wetland. So the portion that is not wetland is the portion that occupies the structures now in the proposed structure. So it's really the only suitable place for this to go. The existing garage has got some water issues there that they're trying to correct and maintain a new structure by putting it up there. And I would also just refer everybody to the explanation of the practical difficulty that was submitted in the application on both parts. I think she has answered that well.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Anybody else? Yeah, I think one thing that makes this unique is that the wetland change, the designation of the wetland. And also another unique thing about our ordinance is we have setbacks that, the state doesn't have, that Wetland Protection Act does not have. They just, don't allow our building within a wetland. Our ordinance, the intent is to protect the wetland and no impact on that wetland. And Soil and Water Land Services, I think all of us here are satisfied with that will happen. So kind of a unique situation. Remember, variances are for relief from the strictest interpretation of the ordinance. And in this case, the intention of the ordinance is met even if the setback isn't. So anything else on number 4? Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? I agree with Marv and the answer that the applicant gave that, the change prior permitting and that wetland designation change are, the unique layout of the lot. I mean, it's a large lot, 67,000 square feet plus 160 feet wide, way more than minimum standards. Just all of these things come together to put the landowner in a corner, a very small corner.
Quite literally.
Yeah. So anything else on number 5? Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Clint?
Yes, I believe so. Going through this process tonight with this applicant and this application and everything we've heard and come through, they're not looking for the cheapest way. They're not looking for the most expensive way, but it looks like they're trying to do it the best way. And I think when we look through all the things we just talked about, one thing that wasn't maybe said is if we look at that property the way it is right now, actually, when if they put this new garage in and then do the things that we put in place for the conditions, it'll actually make probably that wetland more protected. So a lot of times we get in a small area like this, it's tough for us to say yes or whatever. And I don't know how the vote's going to go, but in this case, as far as what I can say is, I think it kind of fits and makes it better. So that's what I would say to question 6.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Anybody else? Okay, are we ready to vote? I think that is a yes. In the, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Marvin?
Yes.
Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Okay, all the questions have been answered to the affirmative with the 3 conditions in mind. Is there a motion to approve this?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve this request with the 3 conditions.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion on that motion? No further discussion. We'll proceed to vote. If you agree with the motion, say aye. If you disagree, say nay. Roll call vote. Clint?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
And myself is aye. Okay, motion carries. Your variance has been granted. Always feels funny saying granted. But C Land Services about permitting and et cetera.
Yep, so your next step will be to pull the permit for the garage.
Okay,
So you'll come in and do that, and then you're ready to go, and you can do that as soon as tomorrow if you'd like.
sounds good. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda. Thomas Brzezinski, 21228 Forest Road. Tom, if you'd come up front and get a mic real close. Little Falls, after the fact, variance to continue a 7-foot by 17-foot roof addition on the existing home located in Darling Township. Please state your name for the record.
Thomas Prozinski.
Bring the mic really close to you.
Thomas Prozinski. My address is 212284 Forest Road, Little Falls.
Thank you. Okay, staff report. Thank you, Amy.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, this is an after-the-fact variance request to expand a dwelling within the lake setback located in Section 13 of Darling Township. The ordinance references for this is 706.1 and 706.3. Here's a plat map of Darling Township, and the red dot is the location of the parcel. And then here is the request received from the applicant. And then a site drawing also provided by the applicant. And then here's an aerial photograph of the parcel. And then a zoomed in just on the riparian portion of the parcel. And then here is a photo from the shoreline. And then here are some photos that were taken at the site visit on the 15th. So again, the property's in Section 13 of Darling Township on Green Prairie Fish Lake. The parcel is a conforming duplex lot size. The parcel is 200 feet wide and 88,300 square feet on the lake side of the property. The overall size of the parcel is 6.92 acres. According to the assessor's records, the 2,220 square foot dwelling with a full basement was built in 1941. The home was built prior to land use controls, and it is approximately 40 feet from the lake. The Land Services Department became aware of construction of a roof extension placed on the home. The roof extension is approximately 68 feet from the lake. And then here are the before and after photos. And then here is an aerial photograph of the property with setback from the lake. No permitting was on file for the work, and a first notice of violation was sent. The applicant is requesting an after-the-fact variance for the 7x17 roof addition onto the north side of the home. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals are natural resources and open spaces, Goal C2, shoreline development, Goal D1. And the comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is surface water goal, Objective B, land use and development goal, Objective B and D. 47 notices were sent and no comment was received prior to the hearing. And here are your finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. The applicant have anything to add at this point?
No, I guess I have one question. Is before the voting or whatever, if it happens or does not, I'd put that on for a safety issue. But now that I'm meeting this, if it ever comes to where it would be built in, is that still an option for me? Or I did tell you it's been there for 5 years now, roughly. But I put the roof on there for a safety. I mean, but if it ever comes, could I have the right to put up a wall on it? Or no? It's just as is now.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Okay.
All right.
Yep, so if you were to enclose that or wanted to modify it in any way, it would be a variance. Because that structure does not meet setback from the lake, really any
Alright.
modification you do to it, you'll be in a variance situation.
All right, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, good question. Okay, anything else?
No, that should be.
Okay. Okay, board, you have questions for the applicant?
Mr.
We-
Chair.
Before I go to you.
Okay.
Sorry, Marv. We were out on Friday on the 15th and met with the applicant on the site, all 5 of us on the board with Amy. So go ahead, Marv. Sorry
Okay.
to
Mr.
interrupt
Chair,
you.
that's fine. So you had submitted a stormwater management plan where you had put gutters and a rain barrel like that. And then I see it's open and then you have right now like some vegetation, like a little buffer, and it looks like a good area to absorb the moisture. And was your plan still to put the gutters and put a rain barrel, or was it to stay the way it is?
By all means, I'd love to put a rain barrel and hold the water. I mean, we have flowers, gardening. If that's all right, yes, I'd be more than happy to do that.
So then your plan is to put that gutter on later on
Yes,
and do
yes, if
that?
it all goes through, yes, by all means.
Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marv. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Clint.
Okay, so Tom, when you put that extra roof over that entryway, that was that same time you re-roofed your house, right?
Yes,
So when you re-roofed your house, you just extended out. So you didn't think you needed a building permit at that time to extend that, mean you're just extending the roof?
yeah, no, I
Okay.
didn't. I mean, no, I did not.
Okay. And then they found out because they come out and assessed and asked if you did anything different, and you told them that,
Yep.
and that's how this come about.
That's how it came
Okay.
about.
Thank you, Clint. And there was already a slab there, correct? And this new extension of the roof just covered the existing slab?
Yes, the slab
So no
was-
impervious surface change?
Yes, exactly. The concrete slab was always there.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, I'm assuming that he knows that the shore impact zone is 50 feet, and this is, the setback is 75 feet. You're not, that 68 feet tells you you're not in the shore impact zone, this, where the house is, the cabin is, but not this lien is. I don't know if you were informed that or not, that little gutter or roof.
Would you repeat that for me again? I mean, you sort of lost me there a little bit. I don't,
Maybe Amy would explain that, because it's 68 feet and 50 feet. Would you please, you're the expert.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy, please.
If you recall, when we were on site with you, when we were first looking at the roof, if we were to permit something today, it would need to be 75 feet from the lake.
yes, okay.
Okay?
Yes,
So then in the house, the closest point of the house to the lake is 40 feet. So the house is within the setback to the
Yes.
lake. Then we have another setback, the first 50 feet from the lake is considered the shore impact zone. And so what Marvin was saying is that because the house is 40 feet from the lake, a portion of that house is also within the shore impact zone. So really, it's non-conforming for two reasons. It's in the shore impact zone, and it's within the structural setback.
All right, okay, thank you.
Amy, could you go back to the photo of the shoreline,
Of what?
of the shoreline of that shore side of the house? Oh, you don't have anything in the yard, do you? Or do you?
I don't have
Yeah.
site photos of the yard?
Okay, okay. But anyway, we were there on Friday, and lots of vegetation around Tom's yard. I mean, I think he prides himself in keeping everything green and well-treed and well-maintained. Yeah, this is a good view of it. And you've lived there your whole life?
Yes,
And you can see this is an old, well-maintained homestead. Even though the house is 40 feet from the shoreline, it's very well protected. There's an ice berm that's built up there that really reduces any possible runoff from the house to the lake. In fact, it even would naturally pool there, wouldn't it? If it would, but it absorbs quickly into the sand, you indicated. That's all well vegetated in there. There's some impervious surface between the house and the lake, there's the riprap along the lake shore, of course, to protect the lake shore, which all the neighbors have. And, but there's also some stone walls, retaining walls that are still in good condition on that property. But there is no other impervious surface anywhere else other than the house and that bit of stuff between the lake and the house. Some sidewalk, some retaining walls. And you see in the rest of the property, any impervious surface is well beyond even 75 feet from the lake shore. So just a comment on that it's a very well-maintained property, especially when you consider all the vegetation on there, trees anchoring everything in place, and so nice to see that.
thank you.
So those are my thoughts of the day on that. Ready to go to the public input? Okay. All right, any public input at this time?
You must be on the north side of the lake, from what I see.
You'd have to go up to the podium and identify yourself and direct your questions to me.
I don't have many questions. My name's Paul Ross, 27354 Honey Hill. He must be more or less on the north side of the lake, I'm assuming? If you're looking from south to north,
Mr. Chair, he's on the west,
on the west?
correct. If you see that red dot, it's kind of on the west
Yeah, it's
end.
been a long day for me, but,
Yeah.
Yeah, so on the west side of the lake.
but yeah, for what he's asking, I don't see no problem really in it, you know? The runoff, one barrel, I don't think is gonna handle the runoff, though it's that big of a roof. But it's going into the lake anyway, and it's clean. So that's about the only question I have.
Okay, well, thank you. Yep, thank you. Any other input at this time? Any other public input? Any other public input? As there is none, we'll close this portion of the meeting to public input. And thank you for your input on that. Yes, so on the west side of the lake, that side of the house faces north. Everybody who lives in Minnesota knows what the north side of any building is like in the wintertime. No sun, ice buildup, yeah. So we understand your concerns and why you did what you did. But, all right, are we ready for the questions then? I guess we are. Is the request in harmony with the purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan. We'll start out with John.
I think so. We're not changing any impervious surface calculation here in any way, shape, or form, so we're basically at an advantage to now have the ability to control any of the water that does hit the roof instead of it sitting there on the cement. So there's not really anything to question about whether anything's changing or not.
Okay, anybody else like to add to that? I guess I would just add that the intent of the ordinance is to protect the lake shore, to protect groundwater, to protect the public. And he's got a large property, large 200 feet of shoreline. It's very well treed. It's there's really no way water can get from his house to the lake because of that berm against lake. Shouldn't say no way, but darn near impossible. So I think the intent of the ordinance is met here by this request. Also, we're looking at something I should have said earlier is we're looking at this request as if it were coming to us for not as an after the fact, but what would we have done if it wouldn't have been after the fact? Would we have granted this request? So that's how we're answering these questions based on that. Okay, anything else on number 1? Number 2, Marvin, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance?
I believe so. I mean, obviously, Dave, you've just pointed out a few things about the property. I mean, the vegetation, the trees. I mean, controlling the water where he's been proven to be a steward of the property. We don't see properties this well taken care of too often. And what he's asking for is to keep this that's been on there for over 5 years for basically a safe access to the home, which we usually grant. So, yeah, he fits all the criteria I see, so should not be a problem there.
Okay, anybody else like to add? I'd just like to add that there's really, by the extension of that roof line, there's really no change in use. The slab was already there, the door was already there. It didn't add any living quarters to the house. It just put a steel overhang over a concrete slab, same amount of impervious surface. So a very reasonable request to ask for an addition like that, that's 68 feet from the lake. Okay, number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Brent?
I think it does. I don't think that it really changes anything. You can't really see this from the road. It's difficult to see from the lake, if not impossible. It follows the existing roof lines. It's just an extension over a cement walkway for the main entrance into the home. It's not really changing anything. It's just protecting that walkway for winter conditions in Minnesota. And I think if this would have come before us before, we would have granted this as well.
Okay, anybody else like to add to number 3? Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? The applicant stated unique to the project because we have, I think I have the wrong application. Yes, I do. Sorry, get to the right page here. Okay, number 4. The main entrance to my house is on the northwest side of the house, which sees very little to no sunlight during the winter. Ice builds up badly in this area. I don't know that that is a unique circumstance, but it is unique that the house has been there for all these years and that has not been ever added on, and the applicant has been there his whole life on that property. That is unique, and the fact that just a very minor request for a major improvement on a 1941 property is the difficulty here. It really meets all the intents and purposes of the ordinance rather than the setback. So anybody have anything to add to number 4?
Mr. Chair, you pointed out about the roof. That was steel that was added, and when you had shingles, the snow and everything will stay up there. And then once you put the steel, it'll more apt to run off and create a safety hazard. So that's why I believe part of it is extended it at that time.
Very good point. Thank you, Marv. Anybody else on number 4? Okay, number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Clint?
I believe so. This, the house and this property was established years and years ago. The house was built in 1941 before all of the ordinances and the rules and regulations and the shore impact zone and all that stuff was kind of formed. I think also that part of this action is Mother Nature with that being in the northwest corner of the house. It's not adding any more impervious surface. Grin kind of agree with what Marv said too. When you go and when you change it from a shingled roof to a steel roof, then it becomes more of a safety hazard. So I think that the need for this variance is more than it's not just by actions by the landowner or the other landowners in the past. It's just a lot of things combined.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Any additions to that, to number 5? Okay, I'll proceed on number 6. Does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? John?
I think we hammered this one home with the safety issue and concern with the snow piling up and it icing over during the cold season.
And the fact that it's just an old property that was built before these ordinances were in place.
Mr. Chair, I'd just add that, yes, it's an older property, it was put there, but, the 6.9 acres, a lot of times we don't see that on Lake Shore. And if you look at the way this property's yard is developed with all the trees and all that right around in that shore impact zone and all that, and there is a out shed and some wood and stuff like that, and you look, that's way to close to the road, it's way out of the shore impact zone. I think it's a well thought out yard to protect the lake.
Okay, thanks, Clint. Okay, ready to vote on the questions? Okay, is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
Number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the Land Use Ordinance? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Marvin?
Yes.
Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? My answer is yes. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is yes. Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is yes. Clint?
Yes.
Okay, all the questions have been answered to the affirmative. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, if I can just interrupt, since this is an after-the-fact variance, and all of the initial questions have been answered in the yes, now the Board of Adjustment may consider the after-the-fact criteria. That is completely up to you. So at this point, you would want to make a decision on whether or not you want to move forward to the after-the-fact criteria or vote on the outcome of what you just had.
thanks for reminding us of that. I always forget that we have to do that before we vote.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Clint.
You know, going through this application and doing this variance is just a small, basically changing a roof line. We heard when he re-roofed the house, he just extended at that time. And what we've heard, I don't know that we need to go through the extra questions. That's my thought. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I don't think it's gonna change anything going through all this. And we kind of heard the reasoning and how this all came about, so.
Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
and the fact that the applicant didn't purposefully do this, it just, steel roof was gone, might as well cover that area. He, I believe, was unaware of the fact that he needed a permit at the time. So it wasn't something he was scheming and avoiding, it was just an oversight. John, go ahead.
I would agree with Clint.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
I agree with what was stated. Otherwise, I want to point out, no living space, nothing was really added. It was just basically roof line as, for a safety concern. So I think we can forego this also.
okay. I think what we've just done is kind of reviewed the questions anyway. So, all in favor of just going to the
So,
motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'll just make a motion that we recommend make a motion that we approve this applicant without going through the extra questions.
Okay. All in favor of
Just a second.
Yeah, I'll second that.
motion to commence with the vote rather than this after the facts considerations, say aye.
Mr. Chair, hold. I actually made a motion to approve without the extra
I think then
questions.
we'd have two motions on the floor, because we already have a motion to approve. And a second.
Well, his motion included approval of the variance without application of the after-the-fact criteria.
Okay.
And John
Oh,
seconded it.
so you just added that.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. So that's okay with me if you added that? Who seconded the motion?
John.
So it's okay with you too, John? Okay. All right, that's the way the motion stands now. Okay, I'll take a roll call on that. In favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Opposed, say nay. John?
Aye.
Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is aye. Clint?
Aye.
Motion carries. Your variance request has been approved.
So your next step is to come into the office and actually permit the roof. Then we're done.
Gentlemen, I thank you. Amy, thank you.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, I don't want to leave and see if you can come in tomorrow. Oh, okay. What? Give me a call tomorrow.
Okay, on to the next item on the agenda. The final item on the agenda is James and Lisa Dick. If the applicants would come forward. 2894 Lakeshore Drive, Motley. Application for a variance to rebuild a home within the setbacks to lake and increase the height. Located in Scandia Valley Township. Applicants, state your name for the record, please.
My wife Lisa, but if it can, I have hearing aids, 40-some years of construction does that, but on Saturday, my charger went kapooey, so if I look at my wife or ask you to repeat something, be patient.
Understood.
I'm Lisa Dick.
I'm Jim Dick.
Thank you. Okay, staff report?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a variance to exceed allowable height and exceed allowable impervious surface. This is located in Section 17 of Scandia Valley Township. The ordinance references for this request is 706.1 and 706.2. And then actually the impervious surface portion too, which I omitted out of here, so my apologies. This is a plat map of Scandia Valley Township, and the red dot is the location of the parcel. And then here's the variance request received from the applicant. And then here's a site drawing also provided by the applicant Here's an aerial photograph of the parcel outlined in blue, and then also some oblique imagery of the property, along with a shoreline view. And then here are some photographs that were taken at the site viewing on the 15th. Again, the property is in Section 17 of Scandia Valley Township, and it is on Chaminade Lake, which is a general development lake. The property is a non-conforming single lot. The property is 100 feet wide and 4,943 square feet. The property is part of the 6th addition to Chaminade Park, created in 1962. There is a 576 square foot walkout style dwelling on the site, located 24 feet from the ordinary high water mark of the lake. The original dwelling was built in 1960, and a variance was granted in 1986 to add an upper story to the existing basement cabin, which is 24 feet from the ordinary high water of Lake Chaminade and 22 feet from a township road. The applicant purchased the property in 1995. This area of Lake Chaminade was affected by the high water issues that have persisted over the past few years. The existing dwelling has been inundated with water and is not salvageable. The applicant plans to replace their dwelling in the same spot with the same dimensions. However, in preparation for the updated FEMA floodplain maps expected to be effective in 2024, they plan to elevate the structure to meet the regulatory floodplain elevation. The applicant is requesting 2 variances: to exceed the allowable principal structure height and to exceed the allowable impervious surface. 3 feet of elevation is required. The overall height of the new structure would be 25 feet 6 inches. 25 feet is the maximum allowed height. No additional living space is proposed. The block utilized to elevate the structure will be filled with P-rock. The current impervious surface percentage is 34.59%. The applicant is willing to remove the patio on the lake side of the property and the sidewalk to reduce the impervious surface to 25.6%. 25% overall impervious surface is allowed. A building envelope does not exist on this property. Then here's an impervious surface calculation worksheet that was provided by the applicant. And then here is a figure showing the lack of building envelope on the property. A temporary and permanent stormwater control plan has been submitted, and that was included in your packet. The applicable comprehensive land use plan goals is natural resources and open spaces, goal C2, shoreline development, goal D1. And then the applicable Morrison County comprehensive water plan goals and objectives is a surface water goal, objective B, land use and development goal, objectives B and D. 174 notices were sent, and no comment was received prior to the hearing. And then here are your finding of fact and decision questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. The 5 of us and Amy were out to the property, and the applicant was there to view it with us. That was on the 9/15. So does the applicant have anything to add to the staff report at this time?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, John.
Amy, I have a question for, when we look at the owners as they get to replace the current building at this point. So we're asking for a variance on the impervious surface, even though they're saying they would reduce it plus the 6 inches on the height, right? Why the first one?
On the impervious surface?
Yeah.
We address the impervious surface when they're making a change that triggers a variance. Then we always address that because something about what they're doing is not a straight up replacement, and so that's why we address that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
Mr. Chair.
Clint?
Okay, so Amy, if they didn't ask for this extra 6 inches, then we wouldn't even have to have.
That's correct. They would have their replacement right, and they'd have,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Thank you, Clint. Anybody else?
Okay, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a couple things here. So Amy, I was looking through your DRT meeting in Shannon from Soil and Water. Had a couple things like she talked about wetland delineation possibly be done. The applicant stated that they're not going to fill anything other than inside that structure. So then they probably wouldn't have to do that delineation.
Mr. Chair, what I would recommend, and I think what we would do is at time of permitting, we would probably have a pre-construction meeting out there on site with the Soil and Water Conservation District, because it's going to be very important that the contractor completely understand what the boundaries of that wetland is and what they can and cannot do within there, because usually under construction, you're going to have a berth around where there is impact. So if there is going to be heavy equipment or machinery or spoils or anything like that, that they need to be very clear on where that can go on the property or that it has to be hauled off. So in this particular case, we would involve the Soil and Water Conservation District in the permitting to make sure that we don't end up with a Wetland Conservation Act violation during this project.
And Amy, you would do that regardless whether a variance is
Yes.
granted or not?
Yes, we've done that with most of those structures along that road because of that very abrupt change from ordinary high water mark to wetland to upland.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Clint.
just get it out of the way again. So I would like a condition that there has to be a pre-building meeting. Like Amy just said, pre-construction meeting. And then also a condition would be that they take the erosion prevention, they have to implement something for the erosion prevention, like during construction.
So just you're talking just a guard, fence around?
Whatever Soil and Water would recommend, or that'd probably be all it would need to be, but something. I'm not gonna tell you what that is, but just that would be a condition that would have to be followed during construction.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy.
Would it make sense just to say that the property owner must implement best management practices for stormwater control with the approval of the Soil and Water Conservation District, something like that? Is that what?
I'd be fine with that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Brent.
I had a question for the applicant. James or Lisa can answer this, maybe. That existing structure that's there, is that a floating slab with block going up from, or is there actual footings?
I can't
Down below.
answer that. I can't answer that. I wasn't there, when it was built. I'm guessing that there are footings, and that's one thing, when I get with a contractor, I want to find out, what is there. So if there is footings there, fine. If not, then I'm going to have to deal with that.
My question, or my reason for that question is filling that inside with 3 feet of P-rock without there being footings on the outside. How high do you fill the inside before you have to have some support on the outside? Otherwise, it's going to push out.
Well, I think at our meeting that we had on Friday was that I had talked to a couple of contractors, and they said what they would do is core fill the block, put rod in each, and then core fill it, which should support, the structure or the block itself from being pushed out.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy.
To Brent's question too, one of the other things that we look at is because this is in the floodplain, that wall has to be rated because it's expected that it will flood, and so you've got to have enough on the inside to counteract any pressure from the water. So that's going to be a fine balance, because in non-flood times, we have to make sure that is not, so this foundation is going to need to be engineered, as far as, because it needs to meet those flood-proofing standards for FEMA. So that will be something that'll have to be looked at, because it's going to have to be built to withstand that pressure from floodwaters as well.
So then, is that something that would be discussed during that
Pre-con
pre-construction?
meeting, actually, that would be something, we would be seeing those plans coming in at time of permitting. So we would be permitting the project, and then before they're actually going to be building, then we would have that pre-con meeting with soil and water and all of that. But we would be looking for those plans at time of permitting the structure, because at that point, that's when we have to ensure that those FEMA floodproofing standards are being met. Otherwise, we can't permit it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair,
Mark.
something I want to comment on. As it was brought up in the DRT meeting, the impervious surface, 35%, I believe, and we're asking to drop it down to 25. And your patio right now is 17 feet 6 inches from the high water mark, which they're lawfully put within 50 feet. I know you're not asking for much, 6 inches is pretty minor, but I don't know if we should put a condition on. You had stated you're willing to lower the impervious surface wherever possible, from removing a shed if you don't need a storage shed on both sides, to possibly lowering your amount of patio in there. Understand you want a nice platform to be able to put a few chairs, sit out and enjoy the lake. You don't have a big gaudy deck hanging over that's going into to stand out there. So you're not asking for a whole lot, but I'm thinking I'd like to encourage that possibly happening.
Sure.
I don't have any other questions, but I just want encouragement with that.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Amy.
I just want to clarify what you're saying. So the proposal to get down to the 25.6%, because part of the ask is to maintain impervious surface at 25.6% rather than the 34, and they were proposing to do that with the removal. Are you saying that you don't necessarily agree that they need to and can continue the 34.5%? I just need to make sure I'm very clear, because you'll need to make this very clear on what you are voting on and what you're allowing.
So I read that, and you read it out, that they're willing to lower the impervious surface. Is
That is their
part-
plan, yes.
Okay.
Yep,
That
and
would be
they're
great.
still over, though, even with the removal, they're still over. And so they're asking for variance, and so it's understood what they put forward would be, their ask then is to maintain that 25.6% impervious surface rather than the 30.
Okay, I go along with that. I thought, the way I read it, understood it, was they were willing to possibly do this, not.
Yeah, that was
it
their
pers-
proposal to reduce it down,
Okay.
but even with that, they're over.
Okay, no, you answered that question. Thank you.
With that in mind, thank you. With that in mind, and thank you for clarifying that, Amy, I would say that a condition, if you're thinking of granting this request, that a condition should be not to exceed 25% impervious surface, and that should be measured by a third party.
Then, Mr. Chair, you would essentially need to deny that part of the variance request then. So you'd need to be voting, you'd have to split this, and you'd have to vote, because they're asking to maintain more, so you would have to, if the Board of Adjustment chooses to separate these two asks, then you'd essentially be denying the impervious surface portion of the request and considering the height separately.
Mr. Chair, I think we're splitting hairs on his 0.6, and we're not willing to possibly deny 25.6. That is just so minute, it really doesn't matter, in my opinion, on that.
Well, I agree with that, but for different reasons. Okay, all for nothing, all or nothing, huh? Everybody wants to consider this as one request. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Nay, but, okay, Any other questions? If not, we'll go to public comment then. Open up for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Yes, go ahead. Yep, state your name one more time. Oh, you got to do it right into the microphone. I'm sorry.
Paul Ross, 27354 Honey Hill.
Thank you.
From the way it sounds, you'll have to go down 48 inches. You got your FEMA regulations, your rock coming off the lake. You'll have to put a drainage on the inside to pump anything out that's coming in. Other than that, there isn't much else that I can see, you know. You put your rock, class 5, so you can build on top or whatever he's gonna use for whatever. But then core filling's probably the best, but I'm not sure what the FEMA regulations are right now. You know, as 2023 is, but sounds good. You know, is he gonna have covering over this? Totally? And how
Well-
much runoff?
Okay, we'll answer that question after.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks for commenting. Is there any other public input? Any other public input? Any other public input? Yes, there is none. We'll close the meeting to public input. I'm not sure if you got those questions, Amy. Are they answerable?
Well, one of the questions was whether it was covered, and I'm not exactly sure.
The building's going over
Is
the
the-
whole thing that's filled.
The building will be, there's going to be that elevated block foundation, and then the building will go on top of that, so it'll be totally capped. Is that answering your question? Okay. Yeah. No, nope, nope. And then for runoff, you know, there's the runoff is a direct function of how much impervious surface there is on the property, and then also how much roof area there is on the property. That has not been calculated, but there is a stormwater plan in place to be handling that.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're ready to go to the questions. I guess before we go to the questions, I'd like to ask the applicant to explain your practical difficulty. You have it in the application here, but what is your practical difficulty?
Well, we can't use our cabin. We can't be up there. We, for 5 years, we have had to sit and watch it deteriorate to nothing.
I'll rephrase that question. The reason we're here tonight is to review your variance requests, your 2 requests.
Right. And I'm not,
If you were to meet the ordinance standards, you wouldn't need to be here. What is your practical difficulty for needing overage on your impervious surface and overage on the height of your building? What is that practical difficulty?
You're talking the 6 inches that we're asking for?
Yes, and the overage on the impervious surface.
Okay, the 6 inches is because right now it's at 22 feet. And if I add 3 feet onto that, with the span that has to go across with truss joists, I have to have another 6 inches because the trusses, what they're in there now is 2x8s. And if I add the truss joists in there, that gets me to that 6-inch point. What we had talked about on Friday was that I could go to a 312 pitch, and I believe one of the,
Well, you're actually, you covered that very well out at the site viewing, but you're actually reviewing plan details rather than practical difficulty. You could design your structure differently. You could choose a different, a story and a half, something with a loft in it, something that you could meet the height requirements. Just the plan that you'd like to use is not a practical difficulty, it's just a personal preference. Practical difficulty has to do with the property,
true.
the uniqueness of the property.
Yep.
And same thing on impervious surface. It can't be personal preference just to be overed. There's got to be a reason you have to be over.
Well, again, the reason would be is because of the truss joists. It adds
Okay,
about 6 inches to the height.
sure.
So that's, I guess, does that answer?
That's your answer to the question. We have to decide if that's a practical difficulty or not.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. He asked about the footings. And you said something about, do I need to get an engineer in there and find out if the block, core fill block will maintain the?
Static pressure.
Okay, even if there are footings there?
So when you're gonna, it's gonna matter when the FEMA floodplain map becomes effective. You have to show that you have adequately flood-proofed that structure, and they have specifications for that, and I'll provide those to you.
Okay.
And so you'll need some review to say, yes, this is because there's different ways you can elevate above. One of them is on block or on pilings or on, and then they have a specification for that because it doesn't, so when they're looking at the flood insurance program, they're looking at, have you done what you need to do to protect yourself, and are we going to have a claim? And so it's great that you're 3 feet, that you're gonna go 3 feet, but if the whole thing collapses because it can't handle the pressure,
Gotcha.
then it doesn't. So there's some specs that they have.
One thing, Amy, is that there's been talk out there about FEMA having, if you're in a floodplain, you have to have flood insurance.
Yes,
Okay, my question is, I had flood insurance,
Mm-hmm.
and the claim was denied.
yeah, because you weren't in the mapped floodplain. So you are not in the mapped floodplain yet. It's coming.
Oh, okay,
That's the biggest difference.
okay.
Yeah. So right now, flood insurance for you is optional. No one's making you get it. But once FEMA updates that floodplain map and it becomes effective in 2024, it's a game changer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Amy, on flood insurance, now flood insurance is always optional, correct? Unless you have a mortgage, then the mortgager requires it.
Yep, if you have a
So
federally backed
You
mortgage.
can get fire and hail and wind on a structure and choose not to get flood insurance.
That's correct. If you have a federally backed mortgage, however, you must.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But if you don't carry a flood insurance policy and you're in the map floodplain and you have a flood, then your
Self-insured.
relief options are limited.
Your self-insuring always has its, negatives and its positives. Flood insurance is very expensive. From what I understand, it basically doubles your homeowner policy. At least.
It's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
Well, let me take that back.
Depending on,
Yeah, when I first had flood insurance, it was $600 a year, which isn't astronomical. But after you put in a claim, it goes up to, it went up to $750, okay? Then they came out and looked at the structure. The next time it came around, since it's been 5 years, the third year they came around, they said it's gonna be $2,700 for flood insurance. And that's when I told them, I'm sorry, that I'm not gonna do that, so. But yeah, when I talked to my insurance agent, flood insurance really isn't all that much.
okay. All right, thank you. Well, if we're ready for the questions, we'll close off any other discussion other than just between the board members here. Let's see. Check off my list here to make sure I don't get confused. Okay, we'll start off with you, Marv. Is the request in harmony with the general purposes, intent, and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan?
I believe it is, and Lake Shamana poses a real unique situation. I think none of us like to grant the variance when you're that close to the lake and what you're asking for, but because of what was mandated by FEMA and raising and whatever, and you're basically going to be rebuilding what you got, and you want to make sure it's sturdy and strong, and making sure you're putting roof trusses in, our floor joists to raise the roof enough to have a 412 pitch. As you pointed out earlier, you could drop to a lower pitch and meet it, but you're willing to work with us and willing to drop your impervious surface by 10%, which I see that as a win-win. And I think with that being said, that is what we'd like to see and is in harmony of our ordinance.
Okay, thank you, Marv. In harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. The intent of the ordinance is to preserve natural resources, to protect the environment for the use of all of the people that use the lake, and water and other resources. There's really nothing about this lot that's in harmony, but there's other lots similar to it in the county, for sure. It's a very non-conforming lot at 4,943 square feet and no building envelope. It's a non-buildable lot under most circumstances, other than that you have the right to replace what you have. It's less than 20% of a conforming lot. In an ideal world, it would have 20% of the use of a conforming lot. But in reviewing with you on Friday, you've got a lot of guests, a lot of family, and you like to get together there. Who wouldn't? There's no place to park. We had to park down the road and walk up. You're very limited at that site. The intent of the ordinance is not to expand nonconformities, not to create any new ones, but not to expand any, and to actually eliminate nonconformities if we can. You're asking for two nonconformities here, over the impervious surface allowed and over the height allowed, when those are just personal choices. They're not practical difficulties. They're just what you want to do on that property. And there's no way we can condition you to use the property in a good way, in a way that is providing stewardship to the lake shore and to the use of the lake. But there's no reason you can't replace your cabin and meet FEMA's requirements and get your flood insurance without this variance. It's just strictly a design choice. So I guess I'm answering the practical difficulty part of the question, and the intent of the ordinance is not to expand nonconformities. You're asking for two. Not to overuse property, to have a viable, plan to reduce runoff. Marv stated that, will it be better with the patio gone? In my opinion, I don't think so. You've got such intense use of that property. If that was all grass in front there, you just have that 32 square foot landing that you're allowed. You'd come down onto grass. It'd be wore out shortly. You'd have probably bigger problems than the patio presents. You can, if you want to get flood insurance, you can meet FEMA requirements, and without this variance, you don't need the variance for that. So nothing that you're asking, I believe, is in harmony with the purpose of the ordinance and the intent of the ordinance.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, John.
you referenced the lack of practical difficulty here. I think the water level of the lake is a probably one where you build and have a cabin in what is not a flood zone, and then all of a sudden it becomes a flood zone due to the natural resources, not anything that anybody up here or the landowner has control over. So that is certainly a practical difficulty. I'm not sure what parking has to do with this request specifically, and I don't think Morrison County, to my knowledge at this time, is regulating any lake activity per each lot. Okay. And then the two nonconformities that you referenced, sir, the landowner is actually willing to work with us and reduce one of the nonconformities when he doesn't technically have to at all at this point by putting a 312 pitch on that roof. So I'm not sure what we would be pushing. I'm not sure why that wouldn't be in harmony with or meet the general purposes and intent of our land use ordinances.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, this is just partial response to that. This is a expansion of an existing building. Yes, by going up, it's an expansion. Its ordinance is the only way that we have of controlling use of a property. And when it's applied correctly, it does limit use to the intent of the ordinance. Okay, anybody else on question number 1? Number 2, is that applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the land use ordinance? Brent?
I think he is. He's proposing to rebuild something that's been destroyed by high water, not looking to expand his property in square footage, but trying to meet the existing height limitations set by the county ordinance. He's proposing to use the property just as he's used it now, but he's also trying to meet the new FEMA criteria that's coming, in anticipation of that. He's trying to meet those standards, and by doing so, he's got a proposal here to raise it up and use some of the existing structure that's already there, not tearing it out, not putting in a pier and post, but actually using what's currently existing. The 6-inch height is not a large stretch. Is it reasonable to request that? I think it's reasonable to request it. He could use different floor joists and come down 6 inches. He could change the roof line to come down, all of those things, but those propose other problems too as far as winter conditions and snow loads in Minnesota. So is he proposing this in a reasonable manner? I think he is.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I personally, feel that is it reasonable to build something out of ordinance on an unbuildable lot? I don't think that is reasonable. Is this a reasonable location for a cabin that really does not meet, a property that does not meet his personal needs? I don't think so. When you look at the request as 6 inches of roof line, that does seem reasonable. But again, he can rebuild, he can respond to the flood without any variances. So I don't know if it's even reasonable for him to be asking these. Anybody else on number 2?
Yeah, I'd like to continue on number 2. Without coming to this board to ask for a variance, he could just reconstruct that home as it's existing currently. but that would not meet standards of FEMA and regulations of the future, which we're trying to accomplish as well. So I think being reasonable, yeah, he's being reasonable. He's trying to meet future standards, but build the same house, the same footprint, and that causes it to go up in the air to do that. There'll be a review prior to any construction moving forward, and so I think his request is reasonable.
Okay, yeah, I think we're unclear on this FEMA thing personally. I don't know, Amy, clarify it if you can. But we're not doing anything, I mean, there is nothing in ordinance that is keeping him from meeting FEMA standards without a variance. It's his building design.
Today.
Today, tomorrow, whenever. He knows what the standards are going to be. He has a right to rebuild. He can rebuild smaller than what he has, or the same as what he has. Is that correct, Amy? So, no matter what FEMA standards are, if they're 6 feet above, he could come up with a building that meets their standards and get his flood insurance, if he's required to get it. Or not get flood insurance, if he's not required. So, again, that's why these requests are personal choice, not, it's just personal design choice on his part, both impervious surface and the building height restriction.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, on question number 2, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Just from a reasonable perspective, so I just want to make sure I have this correct. From a reasonable from what the applicant is requesting, they can literally do exactly what they've done with a 312 roof. Keep all of the patio, keep all of the sidewalks. And what the applicant is saying is they're willing to help improve that specific lot by adding this much to the top of their roof. And that's because they can go and construct this with the 312 no matter what, keep the sidewalks, keep the patio. But what they're saying is, I want 6 more inches on my pitch for snow load, essentially, in Minnesota. Do I have that correct? Okay, so I'm gonna say that's 6 inches right there for the impervious surface that they're giving up at 395 square feet is very reasonable.
Okay, thanks for your perspective on that, John. Again, it's the applicant's choice. He could, with or without variances, he could remove patio, he could add green space, he could get under impervious surface. He could do all those things just because he's a good steward of the land. I have a hard time wheeling and dealing with a variance to get something that landowners should be doing on their own, especially on a small property like this where I don't even know if it makes a big difference because it is such a small property with so much use. And yeah, that is my opinion on that. So differences in opinion, possibly, differences in interpretation of what reasonable is. Okay, anybody else on number 2? Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? I get to start on that one. Well, he already has probably the tallest structure on that part of the beach, within a few houses. He'll be replacing it with something that's even taller. Will that be noticeable? No, but it will be noticeable by others that he did get a building permit, that he did get, I don't know if it'll be common knowledge or not, that he did get a variance to do that. And this is the new standard for the area, I guess. Each property, has its own unique circumstances, and we are evaluating this property, not this landowner, but the property and what's best for the property. So will the essential character of the locality be changed? Probably not much because everything is non-conforming there. This will be just a little more non-conforming, so it does change the character. Anybody else on number 3?
Mr. Chair. So yeah, to maintain the essential character of the locality, like you just said, 6 inches isn't gonna do anything to the property. Yeah, it's gonna be higher, but from the bank, it's no higher than any other 2-story building, from ground level. So there's all kinds of small houses along there that are flooding, that are trying to build up in that area. I think it is, well, like you said, it's the new essential character, basically. So I don't think it'll change it.
Okay, anybody else on number 3?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I want to comment too on this here. I don't think anyone on this board likes the idea of encroaching this far and doing what he's doing. But it basically, what was stated by other board members, it is on Chaminade, the new standard that is there, and what do you do? And you try to make the best of what you can. And I think he's trying to be a steward and doing the best we can, what he got, and maintain what he essentially bought and keep that character. I don't like it, but then again, here, if you look as down the line where that cabin is and see where there are others that are even closer. There are others that are damn near as tall as that too, that are down that line. Don't agree with it, but it fits. It's a new standard. So that's where it goes.
Thank you, Marv. Anybody else on number 3? Number 4 is alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property. Clint.
Believe it is. It's unique to this property and probably some neighboring properties, and it's the flooding, the high water flooding, and it wrecked his cabin. He has the right to rebuild, and to go along with the need for this variance that maybe isn't the property, but it's the structure itself, is to meet new building codes and go at a 14-foot truss or 14-inch truss versus a 2x8. That's out of his control. He's not changing any more livable space, even though you're putting a 14-foot truss in that. It's going to raise it by 6 inches. He's gaining no livable space. It's just the new standards, building codes, safety things. By going up, I would agree, and sounds like it's getting covered with the footings and them type of things. And if he's got a core fill or do any of them things, we want to make sure that that's right. But I think there's kind of 2 circumstances that are going with this property, and one is the flooding and all that. The other is just to meet the building codes. He's not gaining no more livable space at all. It's just a truss in between. It's going to be a floor and then a ceiling. So he's not gaining anything as far as livable space. It's just the basic difference is a board.
Okay, thank you, Clint. Remember, when answering this question, we're looking at 2 things here, the impervious surface and the height of the structure.
I will comment on the impervious surface. Similar to what John kind of stated earlier. Yeah, you don't like horse trading, I don't like horse trading. But if we deny this, he can rebuild. Impervious surface is 34.5%. He's going to lower it down to 25. It's not perfect. It's pretty close. That's a win. Yes, we'd like it to be 10, but that's never going to happen on this property, no matter who owns it. So I looking at the impervious surface, it is part of this thing, and I think it's we got to be cognizant of it. But in my personal view, that's probably non-existent when I'm looking at this, because it dropped, and it could just stay the same. I look at more of the height thing and look at it as a win. I know it's not perfect, and he's going to have to really watch it if this does go through, that, he can't do anything because it's going to go up, the impervious surface. But I think it's kind of a win, especially on that lake, because he's going to rebuild. If he don't, somebody else is going to rebuild it there. So that structure's always going to be there. So by dropping it down as far as he's willing to do it, I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to add to number 4? Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's entirely design choice here. It's entirely his choice to be at 25, to reduce down to 25.6% rather than 25. It's entirely his choice to build a full two-story structure rather than something smaller that would probably meet his needs just as well and still, and not require a variance. So there is nothing unique about this property, the flooding, the size of the property, or anything that dictates these two requests. It's all personal choice. It's all design. Anybody else on number 4? Then we'll go on to number 5. Is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? John?
It's been referenced a few times here, but with the new flooding in the flood zone and what the new regulations are coming out, this isn't the first property that we're looking at that is increasing that 3-foot foundation on that lake and on that specific side of the lake. So I don't think the landowners closed the valve and then the lake all of a sudden increased in depth there or rose in however many feet it rose. I think it was at 6 feet at one point, if I'm not mistaken. And you have no control over that as landowners. And that's with new regulations coming down and everybody knowing what they are and when they're going to be released, you're trying to meet those and get ahead of that. That's the reason for the variance request, to build that up and to add that 6 inches while reducing the rest of the impervious surface for this build.
Okay. Thank you, John. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
To add on to what John had just stated, is it created by other actions other than the landowner? It's created by the flooding, obviously, or we wouldn't be here. The other thing we can't forget, maybe we're looking at a lot that maybe should have never been created back in 1962. So whoever did the plat design when the original lot was created and sold, that's not this landowner or a previous landowner. It's who actually plotted and developed it and sold it originally for the purpose and intent of having somebody build up upon it. And because that was done back then, there's always going to be somebody that's going to occupy and live and build and come forward requesting variances. So just that lot was created is by actions other than.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Anybody else on number 5? Again, it's not the flooding that is the issue tonight. I mean, the flooding got him to the stage where he needs to do something, yes, but he can do something that meets ordinance, and he's chosen to request something that's out of ordinance. So it's all personal design. It's all based on the reason the need for the variance is his choices, not anything unique about the property, not any flooding. It's how he's reacting to those things. Anybody else on number 5? On to number 6. Does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than just economic considerations? Marvin?
I believe it does. A few things I'll point out. He didn't have to come here and pay the $600+ fee to go ahead and hear this. As we heard earlier, he could have built exactly what he had there and just ran a lower pitch or whatever. That's just one item. He didn't have to go ahead and give up almost 10% of his impervious surface, but he was willing to do that. So there were just a couple things to point out. He's thinking more than just economics on this.
Anybody else on number 6?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Brent.
I think he's thinking into the future as well. He's trying to make something more compliant with FEMA moving forward, understanding that there may be some new regulations coming. He got that information from somewhere, and he's trying to do that. It's not cheaper what he's proposing to do here. It probably costs more money, but he's trying to make it work.
Anybody else on number 6? Well, if I'm going to vote no, I have to come up with a negative response to that, and I am going to vote no on that question, on all the questions above it, because you can't answer number 6 just because of personal preference. He can meet ordinance and get all the FEMA insurance he needs. He knows that reducing impervious surface is the right thing to do. He can do that whenever he wants. He can meet with the shoreline specialists and get recommendations on how to better be a better steward of a very small lot. It's not more than just economic considerations, and we can't use personal choice and personal preferences as an answer to number 6. So it is just about money. It's about what he wants. So that's my answer to that question. Anybody else on number 6? If not,
I'll answer just a little bit. I think the biggest thing is we're hearing back and forth, and Dave, he's looking at it from a design standpoint where I'm not. He's building the exact same thing he has. He is not gaining 1 more inch of living space. The biggest problem is with the 6 inches is because of the way you have to put that second story in. It's 14 foot or 14 inch, I keep saying feet, 14-inch header instead of an 8-inch, because that's just the standard. He's not, yes, it does raise it, but why would anybody build something and change their roof pitch for the worst or do this or that? He's not, we always talk about, you're good at this, saying livable space. He ain't adding no more livable space. So I think that's the biggest difference on how I view it. I don't know about the rest of the guys and what Dave views it. I'm not saying he's wrong or I'm wrong or right or whatever, but I think that's the biggest difference. So I just think it's more, yeah, whatever. That's enough. Time to get going.
that's it on number 6. Ready to vote. Okay. Is the request in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the Morrison County Land Use Ordinance and Comprehensive Plan? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Number 2, is the applicant proposing to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the Land Use Ordinance? Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Marvin?
Yes.
Number 3, will the issuance of the variance maintain the essential character of the locality? Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
And Brent?
Yes.
Number 4, is the alleged practical difficulty due to circumstances unique to the property? Clint?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
And myself is no. Number 5, is the need for the variance created by actions other than the landowner or prior landowners? John?
Yes.
Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
Number 6, does the alleged practical difficulty involve more than economic considerations? Marvin?
Yes.
Brent?
Yes.
Myself is no. Clint?
Yes.
And John?
Yes.
Okay, the questions have all been answered to the affirmative. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would make the motion to approve this request.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that with the conditions that if you want to add that, Brent.
Those 2 conditions, yeah,
Okay.
2 conditions we talked about with the pre-construction meeting and erosion protection plan, or whatever you had called them, Amy.
Okay, is that clear enough to everybody? Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? No discussion on the motion, we'll proceed to vote. Aye for in favor, nay opposed. Marvin?
Aye.
Brent?
Aye.
Myself is nay. Clint?
Aye.
And John?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. The variance request has been granted. Yeah, C Land Services.
Yep, so you'll need the land use permits and septic design and all of that. And then we'll get those FEMA standards to you so you can have those in mind as you're designing the
Sure.
foundation.
Okay. Do I, when I come to get the permit, do I need, because I have to get with a carpenter, and he has to design the cabin or draw a blueprint on it. Do you need that first?
We'll need some sort of plan. We don't have to have the floor plans, but we're gonna need to see that foundation plan,
Okay.
okay?
So
And
that's a-
elevations and all of that.
That's an engineer then that I need to hire to,
More than likely, yes,
Okay.
because they'll have to make sure that that foundation is rated for the static pressure.
okay,
So, yeah, we'll circle back with you and get all that information to you.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. All right,
Thank God for little,
yeah, thanks, Matt, for doing
Yeah,
that.
good call, Matt.
All the time.
Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. There was one error. It's an obvious one. First paragraph, Darren Welly entered into record. No, I'm on the wrong one. It says Amy Kowalczyk entered into record. It should have been Darren. So that's the only thing I can see.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I make a motion to approve the minutes with the correction.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Minutes accepted as presented. New business,
Mr. Chair, I don't have any,
old business?
none of that either.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'd make that motion.
Okay, Brent,
Seconded?
seconded by John. All in favor, say aye.
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 Meeting adjourned, 8:36.